Have you ever wondered how a poor boy from the streets of London became one of the most famous faces in movie history? How someone with nothing but dreams and a talent for making people laugh could change the world of film forever? This is the story of Charlie Chaplin, a boy who grew up with nothing but found everything through comedy and courage. He was not just an actor, he was a storyteller, a creator of dreams, and a symbol of hope for millions. In this video, you will learn English while discovering the life of this incredible man. You will hear how he transformed sadness into laughter, how he faced every challenge with humor and grace, and how his legacy still inspires people around the world today. So sit back, listen carefully, and let the story of Charlie Chaplin begin. Because this is more than just a story. It's a journey through history, and a lesson in how dreams can change the world. Did you know that one of the greatest comedians in history once lived on the streets? That he was just a boy, hungry and alone, wandering the cold streets of London? This is the story of Charlie Chaplin, a legend born from hardship. Charlie was born on April 16, 1889 in London, England. His full name was Charles Spencer Chaplin. His parents were both performers. His father was a singer and his mother was an actress. But life was not glamorous for the Chaplin family. Far from it. Charlie's father left when he was very young. He was an alcoholic and did not support the family. This left Charlie's mother, Hannah, to take care of him and his older half-brother, Sidney. Hannah tried her best to provide for her sons, but life as a performer was hard and unpredictable. Sometimes there was work. Often there was not. And when there was no work, there was no money, no food, just empty cupboards and cold nights. Charlie remembered those days well. He would later say that hunger became his closest friend. The streets of London were rough and unforgiving. Charlie and his brother learned to survive by any means. Sometimes they would beg for food. Other times they would perform small acts for coins. Charlie would sing or dance for strangers, hoping for a few pennies. Even at such a young age, he learned that performance could mean survival. But life grew even harder when Hannah fell ill. Her mind began to fail her. She would talk to herself, laugh when nothing was funny, or cry without reason. Charlie was confused and scared. He didn't understand why his mother was acting strangely. But he knew one thing for sure: she couldn't work anymore. Without her small income, life became even more desperate. Charlie and Sidney were taken to a workhouse. A workhouse was a place for the poor and homeless. It was supposed to help people get back on their feet, but it was more like a prison. The children were separated from the adults. They worked long hours for a bit of food and a bed. Charlie was just 7 years old when he first entered the workhouse. He was scared and lonely. He missed his mother terribly, but there was nothing he could do. The workhouse was cold and strict. There were many rules to follow. If you broke a rule, you were punished. Charlie did his best to stay out of trouble. He worked hard and kept quiet, but he never stopped dreaming. Even in that dark place, his imagination kept him alive. He would make up stories in his head, stories of adventure and laughter. He would pretend he was on a stage performing for a happy crowd. Those dreams kept his spirit strong. He believed that one day things would get better, and that belief gave him hope, even when there was no reason to hope. After some time, Charlie and Sidney were released from the workhouse, but life did not get easier. Their mother was still sick, and there was still no money. They returned to the streets, surviving however they could. Charlie continued to perform on street corners. He would mimic people passing by, making others laugh. Sometimes people would throw him a coin. Most times they wouldn't. But Charlie never stopped. He kept performing even when no one was watching. Because to him, performing was living, and every smile he got was a small victory. The world was harsh and unkind, but Charlie believed in something bigger. He believed that laughter could change everything. Even if just for a moment, he saw how people would forget their troubles when they laughed, how smiles could light up even the darkest days. And he wanted to give that to people, one laugh at a time. Because he knew what it was like to suffer. He knew what it was like to feel forgotten. And he never wanted anyone else to feel that way, not if he could help it. That belief would become the foundation of his entire career. A career that would take him far from the streets of London, and turn him into one of the greatest entertainers the world has ever known. As Charlie grew older, his performances began to improve. He watched people carefully. He studied the way they moved and spoke. He paid attention to their habits and their expressions. He would then imitate them on the street. People laughed at his performances. They threw him small coins. But more than money, they gave him something else. They gave him confidence. Charlie began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could do this for a living. He could make people laugh, and maybe he could make enough money to survive. It was a big dream for a poor boy from London. But Charlie was never afraid to dream big. His brother, Sidney, also believed in him. Sidney was older and often took care of Charlie. He worked small jobs to keep them fed, but he always encouraged Charlie to keep performing. He told him that one day he would be on the big stage. That one day people would pay just to watch him act. Those words gave Charlie hope. They made him work harder. He practiced every chance he got, on street corners, in parks, even in dark alleys. Anywhere he could find a bit of space. One day, Charlie got his first big break. He was noticed by a traveling theater company. They were called the 8 Lancashire Lads. They needed someone young and funny, someone who could perform without fear. Charlie was perfect for the job. He joined the company and began traveling across England. For the first time, he had real audiences, people who came to see him, people who clapped and laughed. It was like a dream come true. Charlie soaked up every moment. He watched the older performers closely. He learned from their movements. He listened to how they made people laugh, and he practiced even harder. He wanted to be the best. The theater company traveled from town to town. They performed in big halls and small theaters. Sometimes the audience was large. Other times it was just a few people. But Charlie performed with all his heart every single time. He knew that each show was a chance to get better, a chance to learn, and Charlie was always learning. He was like a sponge, absorbing everything around him. His talent grew with each performance. His confidence grew as well. People began to recognize him. They would say, "That's the funny boy." And Charlie would smile, because he knew he was on his way. But the road was still long. He was just a small performer in a big world. And he knew that if he wanted to succeed, he would have to work even harder. So he did. He practiced his expressions. He learned to use his body to make people laugh. He discovered that even a simple walk could be funny if done the right way. Charlie called it comedy without words. He realized that he could make people laugh without saying anything at all. This skill would later make him a star. But for now, he was just happy to perform, happy to make people smile, even if just for a moment. Because for Charlie, that was enough. One smile at a time, he was building his future. And one laugh at a time, he was becoming the performer he always dreamed of being. Charlie Chaplin's journey took a big turn when he joined a new theater company. This was no ordinary company. It was Fred Karno's company, one of the best comedy troupes in England. Fred Karno was famous for his slapstick comedy. He believed that physical humor could make anyone laugh. Charlie fit right in. He learned how to fall without getting hurt, how to make a simple trip look hilarious, and how to turn everyday moments into comedy gold. It was with Fred Karno that Charlie's talent truly began to shine. He practiced day and night. He worked harder than anyone else. He was determined to be the best performer on stage, and soon people began to notice. Audiences loved his silly walks and wild facial expressions. They laughed and cheered whenever he performed. Charlie started to become the main attraction. People would come just to see him act. But even with this success, Charlie wanted more. He wanted to reach bigger audiences. He wanted to go beyond the theater. So when Fred Karno's company planned a tour to America, Charlie knew this was his chance. He packed his bags and sailed across the ocean. It was his first time leaving England. The year was 1910, and Charlie was just 21 years old. America was different from anything he had ever known. The streets were busy. The buildings were tall. The lights were bright. It was like stepping into a new world. But Charlie was not afraid. He was excited. This was the place where dreams came true, where people went from nothing to something, and Charlie was ready to prove himself. He performed with Fred Karno's company across the United States. City after city, stage after stage. The audiences loved him. They laughed and cheered just like they did in England. But something unexpected happened. A film studio called Keystone Pictures saw Charlie perform. They liked what they saw. They liked it so much that they offered him a job in motion pictures. Charlie was surprised. He had never thought about making films before. He was a theater performer. He loved the stage, the lights, the live audience. But the idea of making movies was interesting. Movies could reach more people. They could last forever. And Charlie was ready for something new, so he said yes. And just like that, Charlie Chaplin's life changed forever. He began working with Keystone Pictures in 1913. His first film was called Making a Living. It was a short comedy, and Charlie played a sneaky con man. But it wasn't until his second film, Kid Otto Races at Venice, that something magical happened. It was during this film that Charlie first introduced his most famous character, a character that would become known around the world. The character was called the Tramp. With a small mustache, a bowler hat, and oversized shoes, the Tramp was born. He was funny, gentle, and full of heart. People loved him instantly. They laughed at his silly walks and funny mishaps. But they also felt for him, because even though he was clumsy, he was always kind. And even though he was poor, he was always hopeful. The Tramp was not just a character. He was a symbol of resilience and hope, of kindness even when life is hard, and audiences all over the world connected with him. Charlie had found his calling. He was no longer just a boy from the streets of London. He was now a film star, and the Tramp would take him to places he never dreamed of. Charlie Chaplin had created something truly special with the Tramp. Audiences around the world fell in love with this clumsy yet kind-hearted character. Every time the Tramp appeared on screen, people laughed and cried. They saw themselves in him, his struggles, his dreams, his endless hope. It didn't matter if you were rich or poor. The Tramp was a symbol of the human spirit. But behind the laughter, Charlie was working harder than ever. He wanted to make each film better than the last. He studied comedy like it was a science. He watched how people moved, how they reacted. He tested different ways to make people laugh. Sometimes it was a silly walk. Sometimes it was a funny fall, but every movement had to be perfect. Charlie became known for his perfectionism. He would do the same scene over and over. Sometimes he would film it 50 times, sometimes 100. He wanted everything to be just right, not just for him but for the audience, because he believed that every person who bought a ticket deserved the best. His attention to detail paid off. The films became bigger. The laughs became louder. People lined up to see the latest Chaplin movie. And Charlie became one of the most famous men in the world. But he did not forget where he came from. He remembered the hunger, the cold streets of London, the days when a single coin felt like a fortune. So even with his success, he stayed humble. He lived simply and worked tirelessly, and he gave back whenever he could. Charlie used his fame to help others. He donated to charities and supported struggling artists. He believed that success was not just for one person. It was something to be shared. In 1919, Charlie did something incredible. He formed his own movie studio with 3 other stars. The studio was called United Artists. It was a bold move. Most actors worked for big studios. They followed the rules, but Charlie wanted control over his own work. He wanted to make movies his way, without anyone telling him what to do. United Artists gave him that freedom. Now he could write, direct, and act in his own films, and he could make them exactly the way he wanted. This was a rare kind of power in Hollywood, but Charlie did not abuse it. He used it to tell bigger stories, stories that made people laugh, but also stories that made people think. He created films like The Kid, where the Tramp takes care of an orphan boy. The movie was funny and heartbreaking at the same time. People saw it as a masterpiece. It showed that comedy could also be powerful, that laughter could sit side by side with tears. Charlie was redefining what movies could be. He showed that you could make people laugh while also making them feel, that you could tell the truth through comedy, and the world loved him for it. But even as his fame grew, Charlie remained true to himself. He still walked the streets like an ordinary man. He still listened to people's stories. He still believed that every person mattered. His success had not changed his heart. In fact, it made him even more grateful, because he knew what it was like to have nothing, and he never wanted to forget that, not even for a moment. By the 1930s, Charlie Chaplin was not just a movie star, he was a global icon. People all over the world knew his name. They knew his character, the Tramp. They knew his funny walk and kind heart. But the world was changing. Silent films were slowly being replaced by sound films. People called them talkies. Actors now spoke their lines. Movies were no longer silent. For many silent film stars, this change was a disaster. Their voices did not match their characters. Their style did not fit with sound. Many stars disappeared from the screen, but not Charlie Chaplin. He decided to do something bold, something no one expected. He continued making silent films. Even when the world moved on, he stayed true to his art. He believed that the Tramp did not need words, that his movements, his expressions, and his heart were enough. And he was right. In 1931, Chaplin released City Lights. It was a silent film with live music and sound effects. But the Tramp never spoke, and audiences loved it. They laughed, they cried, they cheered. The film was a huge success. People said it was one of the greatest films ever made. Chaplin had proven that silent cinema still had power, that storytelling was not just about words, it was about feeling, but Charlie was not done yet. He had one more masterpiece to create. In 1936, Chaplin released Modern Times. It was another silent film, but with a twist. This time, Chaplin used sound effects. The machines made noise, the factories roared. But the tramp still did not speak. The movie told the story of a man trying to survive in a world of machines. It was funny and sad, and it showed how technology could crush the human spirit. People loved it. They laughed at the jokes. But they also felt the message. Chaplin had made a silent film about the dangers of modern life, and the world listened. Modern Times was a huge success. It became one of Chaplin's greatest works. But it also marked the end of an era. It was the last time the tramp would appear on screen. The world was moving forward, and Chaplin knew that he had to move with it. The tramp had said goodbye, but Chaplin was not finished. He still had stories to tell, and he would do it with sound. The world waited to see what he would do next, and Charlie Chaplin, as always, did not disappoint. Charlie Chaplin had said goodbye to the tramp, but his career was far from over. He was ready to take on new challenges. He began working on his next film, and this time he would use his voice. The film was called The Great Dictator. It was Chaplin's first true sound film, and it would become one of the most important movies of his career. The world was changing fast. War was spreading across Europe. Leaders were rising to power with dangerous ideas. One of those leaders was Adolf Hitler. Chaplin decided to use his art to make a statement, to speak out against hate and oppression. In The Great Dictator, Chaplin played two roles. One was a poor Jewish barber. The other was a dictator named Adenoid Hinkle, a clear parody of Hitler. The film mixed comedy with powerful messages. It was funny and bold, but it was also serious. Chaplin wanted people to think about the dangers of power and cruelty. He wanted them to understand the value of peace and kindness. The movie was a huge success. People laughed, but they also listened. Chaplin's final speech in the film became legendary. He spoke directly to the audience. He talked about unity, freedom, and love. It was a message of hope during dark times. Many say it is one of the greatest speeches in movie history, but not everyone was happy with Chaplin's message. The world was becoming more divided. Some people thought Chaplin should stay silent about politics. They wanted him to make comedies, not statements. But Chaplin refused to be silent. He believed that art could change minds, that laughter could fight against fear, that movies could do more than just entertain, and he kept pushing forward. But his boldness came with a cost. In the 1950s, America was gripped by fear of communism. People began accusing others of being spies. Chaplin was one of those accused. They said his films were too political, too critical of those in power. He was called to testify before the government. He refused to apologize for his beliefs. He stood firm, but America turned its back on him. In 1952, while traveling to London, Chaplin was banned from returning to the United States. The country he had called home for decades had shut its doors. But Chaplin did not stop creating. He moved to Switzerland with his family. He continued to write and make films. His passion for storytelling never faded. He lived quietly far from the Hollywood lights, but his work still reached millions. In 1972, something remarkable happened. The United States invited Chaplin back. They wanted to honor him with an Academy Award. Chaplin returned for the first time in 20 years. He was met with a 12-minute standing ovation. People cheered, clapped, and cried. They remembered the joy he had brought to their lives, and they welcomed him back with open arms. Chaplin accepted the award with grace. He smiled, he waved, and he thanked the crowd. It was a moment of redemption, a moment of love after years of struggle. Charlie Chaplin passed away on December 25, 1977. He was 88 years old. But his legacy lives on. His films continue to make people laugh and think. His character, the tramp, is still a symbol of hope and kindness, and his life story remains an inspiration. The boy who grew up on the streets of London had become a legend who believed that laughter could change the world, and perhaps, in many ways, it did. Charlie Chaplin's life was more than just movies. It was a testament to resilience, creativity, and hope. From the dark streets of London to the bright lights of Hollywood, his journey proved that laughter could heal, that even the smallest smile could change a life. He left behind more than films. He left a legacy of kindness and courage, a reminder that no matter where you start, greatness is possible. Thank you for watching this story on Lang Fac. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs inspiration today. What part of Charlie Chaplin's life moved you the most? Let us know in the comments. And until next time, keep learning, keep dreaming, and keep believing in your story.